All right, and I think we're on the clock, actually past the clock. And it'd be great for us to start our conversation for today. Welcome everyone to another interesting session hosted by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging practice at Great Place to Work. As some of you are aware, the vision of Great Place to Work is to make India a great place to work for all. And a lot of what our team does today supports organizations to reduce and eliminate what we call workplace barriers and biases to create workplaces for all communities. It's such a pleasure to continue to anchor these conversations. My name is Sandhya Ramesh and my pronouns are she and her. I am the practice head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Great Place to Work Institute in India. I've heard, and it as a usual custom, before we begin the webinar and move into the content that we have planned for the day. It's customary for us to talk a little bit about how we do what we do, and this is what we largely do. We try and build as many inclusion allies to be able to build better DEI capability in India. And these allies come together. There's a support community. Today we have almost 180 plus allies from 100 different organizations in India. We also study existing practices of organizations to share recommendations on how organizations can create more inclusive practices. What differentiates us here is not only do we study internal practices, we also have an opportunity to study all the external practices that impact stakeholders. And as most of you would have read, that's also going to be a key part of our conversation today. We also have a host of consulting solutions that help organizations articulate their DEI visions, structure their implementation strategy, and we run what we call the Include Ed, which stands for Inclusion Education Series, which aims towards systemic sensitization, right, within the organization, keeping the conversation alive, keeping spaces to explore beliefs, and also improve the climate of inclusion alive. And I think a lot of our team invests their time day in and day out as part of, creating environments that are more inclusive. As a larger responsibility, since we are a custodian of so many inspiring stories of great workplaces, we are so excited to bring to you our webinar on sustaining diversity and inclusion efforts in customer-facing roles. And to join us in this conversation here today from the Estee Lauder companies are Karen Thompson and Delna Elavia. Welcome and thank you so much for making time.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Before we introduce both the champions from Estee Lauder, a bit about the organization, and honestly, Karen and Delna, you'll have to forgive me if I mispronounce some of the names that are there as part of the larger, group company. While I'm sure so many of these brands we have had a chance to experience in India. So for some of us who are not very familiar, just a little background about the organization. They are one of the world's leading manufacturers, marketers, and sellers of quality skincare, makeup, fragrance, and hair products. The company's products are sold in approximately 150 plus countries and territories under brand names including Estee Lauder, Aramis, Clinique, Lab Series, Origins, MAC, La Mer, Bobbi Brown, Aveda, and many, many more. I'm sure a lot of us have had an opportunity to interact with the brand as customers, in India as well. I think an interesting, piece of statistics, global statistics, is that they have a female workforce of about 81% worldwide. And 57% in VP and above roles, right? Which also, I think, sometimes is rationalized by the nature of industry because it may almost come very naturally saying that we're in the beauty and skincare space. But I think also being able to create, a lot of leadership level positions, right? And continuing to maintain great representation at the top talks about some of the work that they're doing and how that's been impacting these stats. We have today Karen Thompson, and Karen Thompson's pronounced as she, her, hers. She's been with the Estee Lauder companies and MAC for 17 years. Out of which I think almost 14 years have been in India. Yeah. And in her current role, Karen she heads MAC India and also leads the inclusion, diversity and equity for Estee Lauder in India. She's also the co-chair of the Women's Leadership Network for EMEA and an active participant in local employee resource groups. Karen is a British national who loves India, and I'm also thinking now Sindhi food. Karen, I think this is what we were chatting about. We're also joined by Delna Elavia. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. She comes from, she had 18 years of experience in human resources and the people function. She spent a decade with the Estee Lauder company, and in her current role, she's the HR director for India and heads inclusion, diversity, and equity for EMEA, which is 17 markets for Estee Lauder. She also leads inclusion, diversity, and equity for India. And for the last 4 years, she's been instrumental in launching numerous programs, because I don't even know, it's hard to call them programs or initiatives. And I think some of you will understand what we say by the time we're reaching the end of this webinar, because as Karen and Delna put it when we were having, our conversation earlier this week, that seems a very natural extension of, their brand philosophy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress into our conversation. Karen and Delna, thank you for joining us here today. Anything that you would like to add to the introductions before we get started with our conversation?
I think you covered everything, Sandhya. Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, and thanks for having us here. It's really an honor to be part of a webinar like this, and thank you for all of the great recognition I think that you've already given us right at the beginning.
Thank you so much, Sandhya. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having us.
Thank you. And I think with that, we're going to dive right in. We want to know where it started, how. So Karen, you've been with the organization now for 17 years, and in India, I think, ever since some of the brands launched, right?
Right.
Can you throw some light on the brand philosophy for Estee Lauder companies and share, a few examples of stories that can help us, who've probably seen a MAC more as a customer, right, relate to this philosophy?
Sure. So if I speak a little bit about the company philosophy, and as you rightly said, Estee Lauder Companies is a parent company which has many brands, many of which you would have heard of and that we have here in India. But one of the company philosophies is bringing the best to everyone we touch. And that extends, of course, from a consumer point of view, first of all, right? So bringing the best to everyone we touch means having fantastic quality products and, making sure that we have standards when we're testing our products, that we test the efficacy of our products, that we deliver products that consumers are looking for, that we deliver a great experience, that we have fantastic stores. So that's kind of the consumer angle. But what I would say that we've also done really well is this something that extends down to our employees as well. And Estee Lauder Companies, I mean, genuinely, I've been here for 17 years. I can say it is a company that cares about the welfare, the well-being of how their employees are really doing. And I think that's something that we're going to speak to a lot today, and how that's really extended into the idea of inclusion, diversity, and equity. And it's coming from that place of bringing the best to everyone we touch. So really having high standards in everything that we do. That's really important to the company.
Thank you, Karen. And Delna, I'm going to extend that question a little bit, given you've been with the group now for a decade. Apart from telling us what's also kept you here for so long, because you also, would have an outside-in perspective on, say, the India space in terms of people practices. Would you like to highlight anything about the philosophy, the people philosophy of Estee Lauder, as an extension to what Karen just shared.
Sure, definitely. And I think what's kept me here, I'll start with that as an HR leader, there's nothing more important than keeping people at the heart of everything that we do, and everything that we believe in centers around this. So like Karen also mentioned, as an employee, you truly feel that in every interaction. You feel the high touch experience in every single thing, whether it is if you travel for an induction or a meeting abroad, you will make, there's always a welcome note already from the VP in your room when you enter, which is really high touch again for us. So just the small things that matter, but also on a larger perspective, it's truly family. The whole value and culture revolves around the sense of family. And you feel that again, whether it's in this office or whether it's in EMEA, also from New York. So not on a day-to-day basis, but you see it more even during crisis, where you don't have to go to the management saying that you need this. Before that, you already hear from them saying that this is all that we do. And that's not just whether it was the pandemic, it's always been there for any kind of crisis. And as you can imagine, EMEA again is a very big market. So there could be different situations, like recently there was Turkey earthquake, before that there were other challenges in the market, but you always have them take care of employees, just beyond even work. And I think that's something that keeps me here. I think another thing that keeps me here is also the CSR philosophy. So overall, Estee Lauder Companies has done a lot in terms of philanthropy. So whether we talk about our breast cancer campaign or certain brands that do different things, for example, MAC with World AIDS Day, I think all of this is really important to me because it's more than what you do at work. It's all of this that keeps me here.
Absolutely. And Delna, knowing the amount of travel that you do in your role, I think the initial practice that you spoke about, and just being able to kind of keep up and keep some of those practices consistent, some that I know have been going on for years and just evolving. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think to come back to the brand context, because and Karen, this one's for you. There was a period in India as well where it was quite tough to establish the concept of luxury retail, right? And being an organization, being a global organization to come into a local market, what were some, key parts of your strategy that evolved from this philosophy that helped you connect a lot better with the local market?
Sure. So I think at a brand level and at an individual brand level, all of our brands have done a certain amount of localization. So if I take MAC as an example, we've worked for many, many years now with Indian consumers, and a part of our job as working with Indian consumers is to really understand what are the needs and wants of the local consumers. So in terms of kind of adapting ourselves, one of the things that we've done is, for instance, look at what were the shade gaps in our foundation portfolio, right? To make sure that every consumer in India can find a foundation shade. And that's something, going above and beyond as a prestige brand to make sure that you have the right offer for all the skin tones that you're serving in the country. And then other things like really making sure that we participate in the more relevant occasions. So for example, all of our brands have annual Diwali campaigns. And it's something that, like, for instance, if I take the MAC as an example, it's something we create from scratch, right? Okay, we look at an occasion like Diwali and we say, okay, how will MAC do Diwali, and how will we, like I said, participate with the consumer in India to really make a celebration which is very important in the local market? How will we showcase that in the MAC way and really present something that we think Indian consumers will enjoy and will respond to? So it's, like I said, it's a lot about localization. I mean, even when you said it was difficult to position luxury from a price point perspective, yes, definitely. And one of the things that we've done again across all brands is have a mini range. I think we were probably one of the first companies to really position our mini range as kind of an entry into the brand, and making sure that we had price points that are accessible to everyone. And then we have, like I said, campaign assets where consumers can relate to the people that they see in the campaign. So you'll have recognizable faces or Indian faces or local influencers in our campaign, so that it's still the international brand and it's still that aspirational brand feeling, but making sure that it fits well also within India.
Yeah, and it's also just not my experience, but I remember when we were, during our prep call, I think you mentioned a very powerful thing, and that stayed with me. And even today, I was discussing with a colleague here in Ahmedabad. You mentioned that Mac is the place for people who don't fit in, right?
Yes.
And I thought that that was just such a powerful thing, because if you had to look at gender expressions,
Right.
right? And, I mean, the minute you walk into a Mac store, it's you experience it, right?
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, and how do you all make it happen?
Yeah, I think for Mac, it's a part of the heritage, and that's what I was also saying to you on the call. So Mac was founded in 1984, and at that time, I mean, we're almost 40 years on from now, but at that time, the makeup industry the beauty industry was not in the same place as it is now. So at that time, every single makeup brand was a very formal kind of a place, and there was only a certain type of person worked on a makeup counter, and they would wear white. And they may not be so friendly, and they may not look like everybody else. Actually, they're just a specific type of person. And Mac was like, this is no good for us. Everybody's welcome at Mac. So all the people who don't fit in over there, you can fit in over here. And, one of the early campaigns, which was in the 90s, which was launching our Viva Glam range. And Viva Glam is a range which is a part of our CSR initiatives, where every single penny of the selling price of the product is donated to NGOs that focus on those living with or affected by HIV and AIDS. And also, so we've expanded to certain other projects, including women and girls, the LGBTQ community. So launching that first campaign in the 90s, we partnered with a drag queen, RuPaul, who you might be familiar with. There's a pretty famous show with RuPaul now. And at that time, this was just completely unheard of, a drag queen on your main campaign image, with not too many clothes on as well. And it was just like, Mac is the place where nobody else can do this. And, nobody else considers that this is a fit for beauty. But at Mac, we take exactly what is not a fit, and that's who's at home at Mac. So it's just, for us, it's just such a natural extension of what we do, that everybody's welcome at Mac, and the people who work at Mac should feel free to be who they are. And Mac is the place where you can genuinely and authentically be yourself and express yourself, whether it's through your clothing, through your makeup, through your hairstyles, through your tattoos, through your piercings. It's all good at Mac.
And, Karen, that's also something you talk about this philosophy that existed, 80s, late 80s, early, late 90s and early 2000s in India. Even today, when we're talking to clients, they say, okay, when we're talking about in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's still this, tentative approach saying, okay, we'll start with gender. It's the largest demographic, safer demographic, and then we'll go to maybe disability. We are not ready for, gender expressions or the LGBTQ community yet. It's going to take a lot to prepare yourself. And Delna, I'm not sure if it was an easy task or a difficult task, because this makes things more complex, because all your employees are customer facing. You either have shop-in-shop models, and they're probably dealing with the same society. How were you able to create, one, a safe space for employees, and two, this is where we discovered that your role goes far beyond the ecosystem of your own organization and broader into the community. Maybe if you can throw some light on, and how do you create a safe space for all your employees to be themselves?
Yes, Sandhya, so you rightly said, you can imagine 15 years ago, it wasn't even considered a normal conversation to hire someone from the community to face consumers and have someone who's either cross-dressing or, like you said, anything. You can be who you are in a Mac store. So I think the most important thing is we were not going to compromise on the brand philosophy. So in India or anywhere else that we open, the brand philosophy is essential to everything that we do. And that just meant a lot of conversations and a lot of education. So whether we are working with our retail partners or in any new door that we open inside a mall, the conversations have to happen first, saying that this is who we are and this is how we will continue to be. And an employee of Mac can be who they are. And I think over time, it's become absolutely integrated. But there were times where we did have a lot of conversations as basic as, then what washroom will this person use?
Yeah, and then which basically means that these conversations are largely driven by your projects team, right? Because it's not HR or it's not
Actually, a lot of times it is HR also.
Oh, yeah?
A lot of
Okay.
times it is brand as well. So it is every touch point from the Estee Lauder companies who speaks to them. If this comes up, this is who we are and this is how we will do to support the people who work with us. And yes, so it means a lot of education, not just for our employees, but for our retailer employees. So if we have employees who work in a shop in shop format of another retailer, a lot of education on why we want to do this. So a couple of, I think last year and the year before, we did one of our very successful programs, which is called High Touch Inclusion. So we did a version of that for our POS employees, and we included everyone who works in that store, not just our employees, because we believe that through education, there's more awareness, and through awareness is the only way we can make it a better workplace. And we will continue to embark on that education journey. We do that with every new retailer, and we continue to do that. In fact, I won't name the retailer, but with this retailer that we are working with, we're now going to do a train the trainer for all of their trainers on ID&E and on unconscious bias, so that they can then take it forward to all their employees. Because it's not just about our employees, it's about the entire retail workspace for us.
And it's an ongoing process, right? So, you know,
Yeah.
the education piece is there, and then sometimes an issue can still come up, right? Someone can still have an experience, but it comes back to driving it through the philosophy of the company and the philosophy of a brand. So if someone has an experience where someone's not being accepting of who they are and an incident has occurred, we're straight in leading that conversation and challenging that person, you know, that if you can't accept this person for who they are, you don't belong at MAC, because that's not the philosophy of the brand. So it's a continuous process as well, which we're committed to.
Thanks. Karen and Delna, if you can also talk a little bit about the grievance process structure, you know, and how do you make sure that that is robust enough? So say in case sometimes there are untoward incidents, you know, and it could be anything, right? Ranging from bullying to harassment to sometimes comments, right? What are mechanisms that you have in place that can help employees reach out to you? And, you know, if you can just share a little bit about the process in terms of how that entire piece is closed looped.
So I think first, again, over there as well, on every town hall, we encourage people to speak up. They know that there's an open door policy. So if they're not comfortable speaking to their direct line manager, they can approach me as the head of HR. They can approach any brand manager or even the general manager of the company, so the country head. And that actually does happen because they do believe that they can. And we do get separate emails, we get separate phone calls if there's a concern. And then there's a mechanism in place depending on whether the person wants to be confidential about it or if the person wants to handle it in a certain way. We let them be comfortable because this is about them. And I think over the years, they all know now, it's part of the culture again, that yes, you can put your hand up and speak up. It doesn't matter who you go to, but it'll be taken care of. And I think they know that there's no backlash in that sense. And so they're comfortable raising concerns. But it has been a journey. And I can say that the number of conversations Karen and I have had over the years has really reduced, and we're very happy about that. It's also because now it's not because of the entire education process. I think everyone knows that any sort of bullying or discrimination won't be tolerated. And when we know it won't be tolerated, I think people are also more mindful, and that mindfulness also changes over time to acceptance.
Yeah, well said, Delna. And just a reminder to everyone who is logged in and watching this, if there are any questions, you know, around implementing some of these strategies within your own organizations, please put them up here and we'll pick them up in a few minutes. So I'm also going to, in a way, Delna, extend one more question. And I think I can see Tana, Rishi, J, the hand being raised. So if it's possible, maybe for you to drop a question in the Q&A, we'll pick it up towards the audience question session, or we'll bring you in during that time. Yeah. Then just an extension of, you know, the previous piece that we were speaking about, which was really about people practices. And, you know, to create an environment where individuals can absolutely be themselves, and especially when we're talking about the LGBTQA community, right? And we know that some of them, don't even experience as safe space at their own homes, right? And there's of course like a larger societal context that interplays with the inclusion of the community. If I had to of people belonging to the community, if I had to ask you, are there certain practices within Estee Lauder that seems absolutely normalized for you, where it may or may not really exist as a conscious policy or a practice in an organization today that may not be working as extensively in the area of the inclusion of the LGBTQ community?
So I think just this recruitment piece, I think for us, we recruit seamlessly from the LGBTQ plus community, whether it is for a store role or a corporate role. It's not something that we even think about or question. And it's not just about the MAC brand. You could be in any of our brands, and we are open to the diversity recruitment from this. And maybe this is not something that many organizations still do, I'm not sure, but for us, it's really seamless. It's not something we discuss or talk about. It's just what we do. And I think it's part of all of our recruitment processes, that in that sense, we do a lot of, in this sense, diversity recruitment. And it's not something that we would talk about or think of how to make it better. It's just ingrained that we need a makeup artist, we get a makeup artist. It's not about their gender or community they belong to at all.
It's not even a criteria.
Yeah, it's not a criteria. For us, it's just a
human.
Yeah, it's just how it is.
And does that like naturally extend to all employees who join in laterally? Is it part of your induction program? How does therefore everybody else who's maybe coming from a culture that is that they've not experienced some of these interactions, how are they integrated into the way of working at Estee Lauder?
I think the way of working again is just about being inclusive. I mean, within the whole diversity piece, also just being inclusive. So it's not that we say this is what we need to do or this is how we will do it. It's just that we talk about the fact that respect for every individual, keeping the employee at the center of everything that we do, comes true in all of our processes, and not necessary that we do anything different for a particular community. We do have an ERG, which is an employee resource group for LGBTQIA plus employees, and we have a lot of allies who are part of this as well. So that we have, and we launched this about 2 years ago now. And like you said at the beginning of the conversation, a lot of organizations would maybe start with a women diversity group or disability as a diversity. But for us, Welcome, which is what we call our ERG, came very naturally again to us, because we do have a lot of members from that community, and to have a safe space for them to, talk about their concerns, if they want to come out or if they want to share anything, to create a safe space again for them was very important. We've done a lot of events as part of this ERG, and there was an ERG lead who leads this. So it's not that only HR or only Karen lead it. There's an entire group of people who lead it. We've had, even simple things like explaining to people what are pronouns, how do you use them, how do you address someone if if you don't know what kind of gender the person wants to be addressed, how do you ask them that? That itself is again educational. What do you know about the community? What is Transgender Day of coming out? How do you work with the NGOs that we work with to also educate them on skill building? So we worked with, say, Pride Circle to do some sessions for them, for people who they wanted us to educate, so that we can bring them into skill building, right? So then they can also be makeup artists. So we do a lot around things like this.
I think one thing that's really coming out for me is the balance between the complexities of operating in a very dynamic environment that's still evolving in terms of its inclusive mindset, and the organization doing its bit to solve the problem, and I think just as an organization, you've been able to balance both the spaces so well with some of the programs that you have. I remember again, Karen, when we were talking, another challenge that, I was referring to that we commonly experience when we interact with D&I heads, HR heads, who are trying to take DEI, to the next level is the sustenance of programs. And that is such a huge challenge. I hear that you all have had a program that used to earlier run for a week, which is now, and which has now been converted to a month-long program, and it's not 1 or 2, but 6 years that you have been running, the overall program. So, would both of you like to talk a little bit about it? And and it would be great to understand how the communities also get involved in the process.
Okay, so I'll take that one. I think as part of our inclusion, diversity, and equity overall umbrella, we have different ERGs, but we also have one week called the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Week. And that's across the company. It's not just in India. And this year, it's going to be a month starting from mid-May to mid-June. And every single market can do what they like. There are certain, of course, guiding principles. But for us, it's also about coming together, learning, but also having a lot of fun. So I think a couple of things that we've done, and Karen, jump in if I forget. We have like a fun quiz in the corporate office where everyone's really excited. They are in different teams. And the quiz could be just about knowing your diversity of India or knowing different topics under diversity. And sometimes it's just fun and very competitive. So it just brings everyone together. We've had like different fashion shows. We've had a potluck lunch where people bring different foods from, and in fact, the potluck lunch is so popular that now we do that in India over 2 to 3 days in that week, because everyone wants to bring something and it just creates such a good energy.
Very well contextualized to the India market.
It really is. We really have so much diversity of just food, right, with the culture that we bring. So it's really, really exciting. We do that. But we also encourage people to take that time. And now we have a month and not a week, so we'll have a lot more to do, to just take that time to learn a little bit more. So we all have access to LinkedIn Learning, and we encourage employees in that week to come together and pick one topic that we'll give them a list of the programs that are available. It could be a 30-minute to a 40-minute online learning program. And then everyone comes with their certificate and post it on a certain site together. So at the end of the week, we also see that, we also added so many hours of education, which also happened with fun. And everyone could pick their own topic. It could be unconscious bias. It could be anything else. So we do that during the week as well. So I think it's a week full of fun. This year, we also have another ERG that we just launched a couple of months ago. And Karen actually is the co-chair for WLN, which is Women Leadership Network. For EMEA, she's the co-chair. We just launched it in India as well. So even ERGs for women will participate. So all our ERGs will be part of the ID&E week this year.
And I think what you said exactly about it being fun also, that's really the spirit of the organization, right? That we make sure that we are doing that education that we need to at the serious moments also, right? So when it comes to working with a retailer, or it comes to the staff and the safety of the staff in our stores, we're doing that education at the time where you need to, but we're also doing that education at a time where it's fun and it's lighthearted, and we're talking about pronouns, and we're talking about the colors of the pansexual flag in a quiz. We're doing it at those lighthearted moments as well, so that everybody knows this is who we are. It's part of the good times, it's part of the fun times, it's part of the serious times. It's not just like a training that has to be ticked off once a year. It's something that we're focusing on all year.
Such an interesting practice, and I think it also in a way just creates like a safe space to explore your own beliefs, quietly. Sometimes and again, I think that's another thing that I'm picking up. I think just the ability of the program that you run to have a blended approach, not make everything very classroom structured, but how can we, I think, create more learning opportunities in every way that we engage, right? Through interactions, through quizzes, through the week, which is now month long. And I think also bringing in the flavor of the regional context here in India. I'm also going to use this opportunity to pick up a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. For an organization which never had a DEI approach before, what would be the first steps that they could take towards DEI awareness? Karen, Delna, is there a step one? And if yes, what would that be?
I think step one for me would be like the buy-in from your top management that this is important and this is really what we want to focus on. So whether it's diversity for women or diversity for gender, whatever it is, it just, the whole philosophy has to come that we are all in it together and we really want to make this happen. And if that is the concept and that's the heart of what we do, it definitely works. But I think the buy-in has to come from the top.
And I think if I can add, also try and get people working with you who this is also personally important to. So I remember when Delna first broached with me the idea of, you know, there being like an official committee around ID&E, and that was still long into our journey together and long into our actual, you know, the kind of things that we were doing before. I was like, oh my God, this is something I really feel passionately about. I want to be a part of it. And you need to get people on your teams. So if there's someone within your organization who's already, let's say, an ally or an advocate for the LGBTQIA community, can you get them involved? Because when you've got that little bit more passion on the team, it really helps to drive the agenda. I mean, I know we've seen that even with the ERGs that we have. If we have somebody leading the ERG who it's just like, it's a personal matter of pride. It's something they really believe in. It's something that's close to their heart. It really helps to drive the agenda much, much more strongly because they live and breathe the ethics of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so one, I think build belief with your key stakeholders who have like a large span of influence, which is your leadership teams, and adding to that, identify catalysts who can help you, piece this journey together, right? So thank you, Karen, Delna. I think I have another question, which is a little more specific to the, to the open door policy that you spoke about, Delna. How did you really go about it? How did Estee Lauder go about it, especially at the inception? What were some of the backlashes faced, and how was it handled?
I think we've really not seen any backlashes faced as far as the open door policy is concerned. We've had it all the way from the start. And whether you're in the corporate office or you are, a makeup artist at any of the point of sales, it's part of the induction. It's part of all conversations. Any one of us who visits the store speaks to employees and says that if you have any concern, here's my number. You can always reach out to me. You can always, of course, reach out to your line manager, but we are available should you want to share anything. And I think that's, again, a part of everything that we do. So anyone who goes to the store from the leadership team, this is just an integral part of the conversation to let them know that you may not see us every day, but we are here for you. Even when we have our town halls, we encourage different brand managers to come and attend those town halls, whether they are town halls with employees who are with Shoppers Stop or whether they are our own town halls, even in the corporate office. We, of course, have a formal whistleblowing policy globally as well, and those posters are also there everywhere. But yeah, I think in terms of open door, it's just again integrated into the culture where every single person in the leadership team makes sure that their team knows that when the country head or me address a larger town hall or a forum, we also say that, as you know, we're always open. We actually have a process in the office where we have a little cards in a box called leadership at your service. So if you want time with any one of the leadership members, you just fill in your name and you put it in that box, and it's up to the leadership team to make time and meet you and at least respond to you within 48 hours. Of course, if we are traveling, we'll respond as soon as we are back, or they sometimes fill it in, take a photograph and send me a WhatsApp saying, I need your time. So we try to do different things if people are not comfortable sending emails. And these boxes, if you walk into my office, anywhere in our office, you'll see them around. So people do use those as well. So we try and create these small elements that encourage people more than just email or phone conversations as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Delna, is it the same process like for employees at the store? Is there something that's done differently? So they have access back to the town halls?
Yes, they have access to the town halls. They have access to their district managers who also visit. But like, for example, our head of retail or commercial would visit, or even if a brand manager like Karen or another brand manager goes to, say, as an example, to Delhi for a visit, they would not just visit their brand stores, but they would make sure they make time to visit all our brand stores. And that's, again, something that we do. So they would know that, okay, this person may not be my brand head, but is still concerned about our well-being and, talks about the company philosophy in the same way.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much, Delna. And I think if we had to just sit back and, do you all as a team reflect and say, okay, what's next? And so if we had to ask Karen and you, apart from that travel itinerary, and if we had to look at that broader landscape of inclusion and diversity, how do you see the next 3 to 5 years kind of unfold?
I think so. Globally, we do have a lot of ERGs, and we've not brought all of them to India. So there are a couple that we think would be really relevant. We're still talking about it, but we'll launch them soon. So there's a program called the Reverse Mentoring Program. There's something called Gen Next, which is all about what does the next generation want, need, want to learn, want to see. How do we support the next generation? And that could just be things that impact the next generation. So it could be sustainability, it could be more CSR. So those are some of the ERGs that we are still considering to launch here. We again, of course, as part of WLN, have a very robust mentoring program, but we want to have a reverse mentoring program as well. So that's, again, one of the things that we want to do. But like you said, right, sustaining the ERGs, sustaining the practices that we have is also very important. So without just continuing to add more, we want to make sure that in what we do, we continue to, have that continuous improvement mindset and integrate that into different aspects and all of the aspects of our communities. But yeah, I think for me, it's a balance between launching new ones, but also sustaining what we do and continuing to impact communities in which we already work.
Thank you. Anything that you'd like to add, Karen?
I think Delna really covered it, but yeah, I guess making sure we stay true to our original mission and some of the things that we're already doing as a ongoing practice, we'll continue to do that. So, for example, we have a program which is called Unconscious Bias, which is mandatory for every single employee of the Estee Lauder companies, and it's a training program where it really helps you to understand places where you have personal biases for whatever reason and how to look out for them and how to make sure that you don't show any prejudice. So that's kind of just one example of something which will continue to be ongoing for us. And we'll keep looking for new programs or new things like LinkedIn Learning, as Delna was mentioning before, that we can add as part of the ongoing curriculum, so everybody has these touch points so that they don't forget about it, and that everybody knows that we're serious about this. We're here for the long haul. You can't not know about this at the Estee Lauder companies. It is not possible to not know, and I think that's something that, again, we're really committed to, as well as expanding and looking at new ERGs and new ways to connect with different groups of employees.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a balance between sustenance to infusing, aspects that are relevant and continuously evolving for our employees, and the demographic of our employees. I think one last question, on the topic before we segue into the rapid fire session, and there's also a question that comes a lot to us. I'm not sure if y'all currently track any measures, but if you do, are there any examples of what are some measures that that really help you understand that there is certain effectiveness, or that the efforts that are going in a way are impacting the culture positively? Are there any measures that you all have in place? I see Delna already nodding.
Yeah, so we don't numerically track any numbers. So if it's like, for example, diversity recruitment, we don't track because our philosophy around it is a bit different. So we don't track that.
Very interesting, because I'm also examining my own beliefs when it comes to the usual philosophy of operating. We say what gets measured gets done, right? But I think you're also able to get a lot done. And with that, we'll quickly segue into our rapid fire section. And would invite both of you in to respond to these questions. So if we had to ask you, what according to you is the most important ingredient to build a psychologically safe space where individuals can be themselves, what would that be?
It's culture. To me, it's just the culture of the organization. It just has to come from the DNA to be supportive.
Okay.
I agree. For me, it's what is that expression? Walking the talk, talking the walk, walking the talk. You know, what you say is what should happen, and that's, as you say, that's the culture.
You know, that's a very good metric for leadership. I told you my bias for measures. It's called the say-do ratio. Right? And it's honestly, it's also important. So culture and, walking the talk. Thank you. To move into our next question. Who has played a critical role in shaping your ideology on identity and self-expression?
For me, I'm not going to say a person, but for me, it was MAC, the brand, because like I said, I've been with MAC for so long now. It's been 17 years. MAC is like it's in my bones and in my blood. And because at MAC, it's not even a question. It's not even a discussion. It's just who we are, that everybody is there at MAC. And if you were to go to any, meeting with MAC people, you would just see so much diversity. But for us, I don't think it looks like diversity, because it's so normal for us. So for me, definitely MAC has shaped my full ideology around this.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Delna?
I think for me, it's a combination of my previous experiences and this. So I worked for the Tata Group before with the Taj Group of Hotels, and just that whole concept of everything that you do, you need to think of the community at large and not just your organization. So just the opportunity, even that time, to set up practices that went way beyond what the company had done, and to go back and just see that those things still work today, though I have left the company 10 years ago. I think also set up a mindset in my mind that you can do something new. And also the privilege to work for organizations that allow you the space to do that. And I think it was great that, Estee Lauder also does that for you. Like, you can put your hand up and say that I want to launch Welcome as an ERG in India, though nobody else in EMEA has done it, with, of course, a lot of questions around, is your market ready? Like most of you may know, till 2018, it was not even lawful to be from the community. And it's a big change for the community, for the market, and they're all the way we open up, which is to launch things that are relevant, locally relevant for you. Maybe ahead of its time, like when we did recruitment 10 years ago, 15 years ago, from the community, or when we launch ERGs now. I think both of these shaped it up for me.
Wonderful. And I think, thank you for, reminding us of, some of the advancements that happened. And I think there were also times when, we didn't have an opportunity, just as a legal framework and structure, right, to be even able to accelerate efforts. Yeah. Last question, before we come to an end of this webinar. If DEIB was a beauty product from Estee Lauder that would make retail spaces more inclusive, which one would it be and why?
Okay, so for me, it would be MAC Studio Fix Fluid. It's one of our foundations. We have over 60 shades. And MAC has worked extensively in countries all over the world, looking for every single potential gap to make sure that there should be nobody who can't get their foundation shade at MAC. It's an ongoing process also that we go into maybe a country where we've never distributed before, and okay, we find a person, and okay, we don't quite have their shade. It's too light, it's too dark. We make sure that we're always covering all of the shades gaps. So we have over 60 shades right now, which is coming from and I should have mentioned this before, actually, the original motto of MAC, which is all ages, all races, all genders. That has been our motto, and that is what we try to achieve through our products. So I think Studio Fix Fluid really stands for that kind of diversity, that there will be one for everybody.
Thank you, Karen. And before I come to Delna, just a reminder for all of you attending the webinar, please do share your feedback, because that helps us get better and also keep bringing more, relatable content. Yes, Delna, over to you. If it was a product, which one would it be and why?
I think for me, it would be Advanced Night Repair, because it's sort of, in my mind, has stood the test of time. And it sells so many that for me, it's not about the number of items it touches, but it's just about if we could all touch so many individuals in our lives to be able to make this ID&E concept, communities spread, I think you just leave the world a better place for the next generation. And I think that would be more meaningful for me.
Oh, wonderful. So one which continuously evolves and is ever, ever dynamic to expand, and another one that's to the test of time. Thank you, Karen and Delna, for just your perspectives, your allyship, because we know that there's just been so much effort, internal, external, that's moving towards making us a more inclusive community. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your questions. Thank you to everybody who joined in, to learn more about how you can create inclusive workplaces and workspaces, right? I think that's very important. Feel free to write out to us. I noticed there are about a few more questions that have come in that we've not been able to take up since we're closing the webinar. But we'll try, and maybe Delna, Karen, write to you with those questions, and maybe if you can respond, we can relay it back. But I also noticed that a few of them are from anonymous attendees. Yeah, and unfortunately, we may not be able to fully close loop on all the questions. But thank you for joining in today, and thank you, Delna, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Nitin, you will get a recording of this. It'll be up on our YouTube channel as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great festive day and a steady week.
Thanks,
Thank
Andrea.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye, Delna.